Alright, hey everybody. My name is Mark Lake. I'm running for the head coordinator position. Uh, I hope that I hope that my presentation here doesn't sound as weird to you as it does to me because I hardly ever see myself on video. I have a list of about 10 or 12 questions here that have been asked on One World by Night's Facebook page and on their Glass Council page that I have answered on those Facebook pages, but I'm going to go over them here and then I'm going to elaborate on them a little bit if there's anything that I can elaborate on that I didn't feel like spouting out in the answer section because it would make it get bogged down and unwordy. There are things that lend themselves better to verbal conversation than they do to trying to answer them in a succinct format. Um, so let's start off. I have the first question that I got was, why do you want to be head coordinator? There's been a lot of conflict recently between players, storytellers, and regions, but there doesn't seem to be enough in the way of resolutions. As head coordinator, I would be in a position to help with these resolutions. Just recently, we have found ourselves in a situation where a circumstance happened and it caused two different regions of player bases to kind of get up in arms with each other, whether they were um, actively participating in that disagreement on council or on Facebook pages or through DMs or not. It was kind of a very polarizing situation for two different regions of our game. And that situation has since come to a conclusion, but I don't know that I would say that it was a resolution. It's those sorts of resolutions that I'm looking to aim for. A conclusion to a problem does not necessarily mean that everyone has walked away from it feeling satisfied, and that is the goal that I'm going to try to meet. I'm going to try to make sure that everyone walks away from a problem, if not happy, then at least satisfied, knowing that they aren't being ignored and that the other side isn't just getting everything they want while one side isn't getting anything that they want. What is your history or knowledge of working with being a member of council? I was a council member for over a year for the Boston Chronicle Howl's Revolution when it was a werewolf game. I've had further interactions and views of council on a regular basis as I apply for coordinator positions. I think this is my third or fourth time applying for a coordinator position, and every time you get added to council so that you can answer questions and participate in the election process. And when you are added to council, you get a glimpse into what's going on in that week in council. So that's um, largely what I base my knowledge of how council is on. How do you cope with and deal with negative feedback? uh, Everyone who knows me knows that when I get negative feedback, if it's constructive, if it's approached from a "Hey, Mark, here's something you maybe hadn't considered" sort of way, I tend to try to consider whether or not that feedback is beneficial, and if it is, I try to work it into my routine, the way that I do things. If the feedback is presented in a more argumentative way, which is usually, unfortunately, how people receive constructive feedback or feedback in general. Um, like most people, I will get very grumpy at the fact that I am having someone be argumentative with me. But then after I've taken some time to calm down, same process. I evaluate it for whether or not it's objectively correct or if it objectively will help me in what I'm trying to do. And if it does, then I will adapt it. And if it doesn't, I won't adapt it. But either way, if the person trying to give me the constructive feedback comes at me with an aggressive or argumentative tone, I'm going to make it clear to them that they shouldn't be having that tone and that their feedback will be more well received if they come at it from a neutral or friendly tone. This can be very difficult for some people, especially if they're giving the feedback because they're upset with something. I get that, but try to remember, we all have to try to remember that us being angry at someone is usually not going to result in a positive reaction from them in any conversation that ensues. What experience do you have as a mediator? I put this in my head coordinator application, but my experience as a mediator extends back about 6.5 years now. I work for Goodwill as a lead job coach. My responsibility in that role is to schedule people to go out and work with individuals who have disabilities who we are trying to help find and maintain jobs. And quite frequently, the individuals that we serve will have various issues, and oftentimes those issues will just be that they don't want to go to work that day, or they're having this problem or that problem, and they can get very argumentative. They can start screaming and yelling. It can be a pretty aggressive environment for coaches to be involved in. A part of my responsibility in that role is making sure that when we have those disputes, that I get on the phone or go meet in person with those individuals and try to talk them through what issues they're having and try to explain to them why they are where they are now and what they have to do in order to get the result they want. And sometimes I go and talk to these individuals and they have very legitimate complaints, and I have to kind of reassess if I'm going to go there and say, hey, I know you don't want to work today, but you really have to. If you don't work today, you could get fired. And then they come back at me, well, Mark, some stuff's going on that you don't know about. Here it is. I kind of have to stop and reassess my whole stance. Maybe with that new information, maybe it's not best that they work that day. Maybe that information has to be reported. Maybe it's a legal issue. So I have a lot of experience with adjusting the approach that I take to conflict resolution based on evidence and facts presented during the resolution of that process. How would you address a campaign to pressure an HST into redlining a scene through OOC harassment if players and staff and the deliberate spreading of misinformation? This is like everything but names, man. Harassment of anyone for any reason is against our code of conduct. We have a code of conduct for a reason. It's not a suggestion. We have to follow it. It is the guidelines that we have set for ourselves as an organization to make sure that, or to try to make sure that we are not being overly aggressive and toxic and pushing people away, and that we are acting like civilized human beings. If it's brought to me as head coordinator that someone is violating the code of conduct, which, harassment, especially out of character of players and staff to achieve a specific goal, is definitely a violation of the code of conduct. I would ask for evidence, and usually I imagine that would be provided in the form of screen caps of conversations or forwarding emails. If it's found that someone is violating the code of conduct, they're getting a DA. It's just that simple. The code of conduct is part of the rules of our organization. If you violate the rules, and you aren't interested in and it wasn't an accident, and you aren't interested in trying to rectify the situation, then you get propped for disciplinary action. It's just that simple. You commit a crime, you get punished. Will you commit to introducing and following through on disciplinary action against council members who have deliberately spread disinformation in an effort to pressure an HST into redlining a scene? This is kind of a follow-up to that previous question. I think it was asked by the same person who asked the previous question, and the answer is yes. If there's a member of council who is violating the code of conduct or deliberately spreading disinformation to try to pressure an ST or an HST into redlining a scene they've run, that's a violation of the code of conduct, then yes, they're getting a DA. Especially if it's the second offense. On the first offense, they may be asked, "Hey, did you realize you were doing this? Because if so, stop and make a formal apology, and everything will be fine, unless the other SD wants to continue pressing charges." But especially if it's a second offense, or if it's clear you knew what you were doing as the council member doing that, you're getting a DA. Council members are elected to council or they're nominated to council by their games. They know exactly what they're doing. They should. They're representing their game on council, so they should be very intimately familiar with the bylaws and the code of conduct. And for a council member to do something like that is not just shameful, it is disappointing on such a high level. They are representatives of our games. So if your council member is doing something like that on council, it is a direct reflection on the game as a whole, whether the game as a whole wants it to be or not, whether the game as a whole realizes that their council member is doing it on council at all or not. I know there are a lot of games whose council members don't talk about what goes on council. There are some things you can't talk about, like props and disciplinary actions and plot props and stuff like that, but for the most part, a lot of players, I think, don't know what their CMs are up to on council. And so it's possible that players and storytellers may not realize that some of the biases that people have against them, their region, or their game are a result of the way that their CMs behave on council. They are in a lot of ways everyone else's on council's window into what your game or region is like. So for a council member to be violating the code of conduct, harassing individuals, or spreading disinformation paints a very bad picture for your game as a whole. How do you perceive the office of head coordinator should be involved in a clearly irreconcilable difference of opinion between games or other events in our shared hobby? The ideal solution in any situation where two parties cannot reconcile their differences is that they be able to maintain remain professional with one another in all other interactions. That is, ideally, be civil. If your differences are irreconcilable but don't affect the greater scope of the situation, then you don't have to like each other. Everyone has individuals that they don't like, but as members of this organization, we're expected to be civil with those people regardless of whether or not we like them. Of course, this isn't always the case when emotions run high, and the head coordinator doesn't have the authority to force two parties who don't wish for reconciliation into a mediation. If I, as head coordinator, see two groups of individuals having a conflict, if that conflict doesn't violate the bylaws or the code of conduct, and neither side comes to me asking for a mediation of their differences, I can offer, but I can't say, "Hey, you two, into my office, we're going to talk about this." I just don't have that authority. I think a lot of people sometimes think the head coordinator has the ability to kind of force resolutions on people that don't want them, and it's not the case. I have to be asked for mediation, and both parties have to agree to it before I can sit them down and try to help them through whatever problem that they're having. As long as it doesn't violate the code of conduct or bylaws. Once that happens, if evidence of that is brought to me, then I can start to take steps. There can be an investigation where we gather evidence about what bylaws or what articles of the code of conduct were violated, and then steps can be taken from there. But barring that evidence or both groups agreeing to mediation, there's not a whole lot that the head coordinator can do in an official capacity. I could reach out as an individual and say, "Hey guys, everything okay?" And they could talk to me as an individual. I could reach out to individuals that I know that know those individuals and go about it indirectly. But as an official as an official for One World by Night, there's not a lot I can do. Is there anything you believe the head coordinator should be able to do that the bylaws currently do not empower them to? I think that the powers of the head coordinator are sufficient where they stand. I would worry about the potential for inadvertently overstepping the bounds of the position if those powers were increased. That being said, if I were to give the head coordinator another authority, I think it would be unilaterally beginning investigations. I think there are probably going to come times where I catch wind of something that's happening through the grapevine, through secondhand comments, through context on Facebook posts when people are arguing, and I might think to myself, I think there's something going on there. But it's really not up to me to begin an investigation until someone has brought evidence of wrongdoing to me, or one of two groups asks for mediation. It's not up to me. I really don't have the authority to just start hitting up people and asking for evidence of wrongdoing. That would be all I did for the next 2 years, honestly, and unfortunately. 9. Do you see the head coord's ability? Do you see the head coord as having the ability to improve the overall One World by Night game culture with regards to how players, STs, CMs, and coordinators are treated? And if so, what steps would you take into being able to bring about positive change? Professional and appropriate treatment of our organization's volunteers and players is a base expectation of One World by Night. It's why we have a code of conduct. The code of conduct demands it. It's not a suggestion, like I said before. We have an unfortunate history as an organization of treating our volunteers, especially, with less than the utmost respect, and many have quit OWBN over the years as a result. Anyone who's been in this organization and has paid attention to the authority level, like CMs, coordinators, things like that, anyone who's been here in OWBN for the past 5 years at least, has seen a coordinator quit because of how they have been treated. Our coordinators and storytellers are volunteers. It's just not acceptable to treat people with disrespect, but it's also so counterproductive to treat coordinators and storytellers with disrespect when they are the ones who are sort of enabling you to have the interactions and stories that you want for your characters. I do not understand why disrespect even enters people's minds when they're talking to these individuals. They enable the fun that you are here to have. 10. Should mediation also be used possibly to help with things get to the point where groups are having a hard time interacting? Of course, mediation will be offered when groups are in disagreement, but if one group is being disrespectful to another, then that mediation at its very primary level consists of stop being disrespectful. That is my mediation. I'm not going to be a part of a mediation where individuals are being toxic towards one another. That toxicity and disrespect stops before we begin the real mediation, or see as previous, someone's getting propped for a DA. If I'm invited into a mediation and one or both groups are being completely unacceptable, they're getting asked to stop and apologize. If one or both refuses, DAs. It's really not something I'm willing to budge on. The disrespect in this org between regions, between individual players, between CMs, has been allowed to go on far too long, and it's crippling our ability to maintain new players and to continue with the kind of collaborative storytelling that the organization was really founded to promote. 11. Do you have a plan for a potential emergency leave of absence? I will point out, just like in my answer, I did not even think about this before this question was asked. I should have, because there have been a lot of instances in the past where coordinators have had to step away for personal reasons, and it was kind of a question about what was going to happen, who they left in charge, if they were coming back afterwards. So I will say that in the event that I need to take an emergency leave of absence, then my authority is going to be delegated to one of my AHCs or a sub-coordinator. Head coordinators can have sub-coordinators, it turns out. I did not know that before running for this position. But I will delegate my authority to an AHC while I'm gone, or to a sub-coordinator if I have one. Or if I'm going to be gone for longer than a month, which is the period of time that coordinators are allowed to take a leave of absence before special elections are held, if I know that I will be gone for longer than a month, then I will appoint an interim head coordinator and then begin the process of special elections, knowing that I will not be able to return before special elections begin, and I'll just start the process right there. Yeah, I don't intend to take an emergency leave of absence, but the reason those things pop up out of nowhere and are unexpected is because they are emergencies. I have no idea the kinds of emergencies that I'm going to experience in the future. I literally cannot even comprehend them. They're going to be surprises. So I can't say for sure that one's not going to come up, only that I don't foresee any coming up. And then 12. Will you be able to put aside regional and personal bias and work with each game by the same set standard? Yes. Yes, I will. The benefit of basing all of my decisions related to conflict resolution on evidence and facts, which I aim to do, is that it hopes to minimize bias. And I will have a team of assistant head coordinators and hopefully a sub-coordinator who will be able to point out to me if I am potentially letting what little bias remains show through. And whenever I'm in a situation where an AHC or sub-coordinator points out to me, hey Mark, I think you might be biased because of this thing, I will immediately stop, take a step back, converse with them about why they feel that way, and we will address whether or not I am being biased. If I am being biased and I find that I can't separate myself from that bias, I will immediately let one of the assistant head coordinators or my sub-coordinator take over that particular conflict resolution. I'm not going to answer a bunch of questions that were asked on council, just because it's council and I don't feel comfortable with repeating some of those questions. They might involve things that I shouldn't be talking about, so I'm just going to stay away from it in general. But there was one question that was asked that I'd like to address because it kind of ties in here with bias. And that question was, do I feel like I am a part of a regional clique? And or do I feel like other people view me as part of a regional clique? And oh boy, is that a question. Sometimes I do feel like I'm part of the Northeast regional clique. For those who don't know, I live in the Northeast. Sometimes I feel like I belong to the group, but a lot of times I don't. A lot of times I feel like there is a clique of the Northeast that is very active, out of character in the political machinations of Warm World by Night. and that I am generally not involved in that. I I have experience being a storyteller, CM, whatnot, but it has not been for a it has not been a main focus of my time in One World by Night. Um, so I never really got into the politics in the same way that people who have been head coordinator for 10 years and have been a CM and coordinator for various different genres are involved in the politics of One World by Night. Um, I want to. I think that I could do a lot of good there, which is why I ran for camcord and I ran for set cord, and now I'm running for head cord. But do I think that other people view me as being part of the Northeast clique? 100%. There are individuals who I know to this day think that I am responsible for a bunch of, like, as far as they're concerned, the atrocities that the Northeast has purported on the rest of the org in terms of, like, plot hogging and in terms of harassment and abuse. No one's ever brought this stuff directly to me to talk to me about it, but uh, I know that those views of the Northeast are out there, and I know that there are. I don't want to say a lot of people, but there are several people, I'm sure, that would consider me to be a part of that crew. Um, and I kind of wish that in that sense I were, because if I were, it would probably be a lot easier to stop those things if they were happening. Um, from an outside perspective, I don't really I don't really see it. All I see is everyone else's perspective on it when they say, "Oh, these people did this," and I go, "Really? I didn't see that." Um, but yeah, do other people think that I'm part of the Northeast clique? I'm sure they do. I know that there are individuals who there are tons of rumors surrounding me. I'm sure. While I don't know which rumors those are, I have heard in this very election people saying that they're not voting for me because of uh, rumors that they've heard about me. I wish I knew what those rumors were so I could address them, but I don't, and so we're here. Um, but yeah, while I am a player in the Northeast, I live in the Northeast. Most of my viewpoint is a viewpoint that is probably formed by my interactions with people in the Northeast. I do feel like I am able to separate myself from bias, uh, especially with the help of a team who will help to point out when I am being biased. But basing all of my decisions on evidence and fact is going to go a long way towards preventing any emotional bleed through from affecting my decisions. Um, yeah, and I don't think it will be an issue. But if you disagree, vote with your feet or vote with your clicker finger, I guess. All right, that is it for the AMA. It was pretty short, but it wasn't a live one where people could kind of pitch in their questions and we could go until forever. So those questionnaires are still up on the OB1 Glass Council and OB1 Facebook page proper. If you have more questions, feel free to go ask. I will answer them there. Um, I won't do another AMA answering any further questions. This was the kind of the one I was going to do just so that everyone could get to see my face and hear my voice and know who I am as a person. I know a lot of times, recently especially, I've gone to events and someone that I know has called me by name, and then I have someone turn around and go, "Are you Mark Lake?" And then it turns out I know them from online interactions, but as is the case with the past 2 years, not a lot of face-to-face interactions. So it occurs to me that a lot of people maybe don't know what I look like or what I sound like or really know me on a face-to-face level at all, and this was the closest I could think of to kind of help alleviate that. So yeah, if you have more questions, go ask them in the questionnaire. I'm glad to answer them. And I hope I will be your next head coordinator. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.